Hey, this is Raj here, and welcome to Living on the Internet. Today, we will be chatting with Rahul Mathur, the founder of BimaPe. Now, starting an insurance tech company in India at the young age of 22 is no easy feat. Rahul moved back from the UK to be able to do this. We will chat about what got him interested in this space and the differences that he finds between the foreign ecosystems and the Indian ecosystem. Moving on, we will discuss Rahul's spree of building in public. Rahul has been writing a lot on Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as Substack. Let us see what tips he has for us founders. Also, let's hear out Rahul on what he thinks about insurance for people who are in their 20s. We will be ending this episode with a rapid fire round wherein I'll be asking some very interesting questions to Rahul. So stay tuned and let's get this started. Welcome, Rahul, to the first ever episode of Building on the Internet with fellow founders. Right. So, Rahul, to get started, can we have a quick introduction on what your company BimaPe is all about?
Sure, Raj. First of all, thank you for having me. You know, there are two people from STOA on BimaPay's founding team, so I am equally pumped to be on here and to be first person in. BimaPay's mission is very straightforward. It's to simplify insurance for Indian families. And the way we go about doing it is, of course, building products and tools which help you understand the cover that your family has today and cover that you require. The stage we're really at is making consumers aware of the insurance that they have. We began with insurance on their debit and credit cards, got a couple more tools in the pipeline, and we're very early stage, right? So we haven't even finished 4 months of operation. So I really wish I could tell you a bit more about what our next few set of products are, but I like to leave a bit of a cliffhanger for most people.
That's fair enough, Rahul. I think the obvious question that everyone who's been looking at you build out BimaPay, the obvious question on people's mind is, hey, here's a 22-year-old guy. Am I right? Like
Yeah,
you're just 22, right? Here's a
22.
22-year-old guy, and when most people are at 22, they do not even think about
Yeah.
insurance. Like insurance is pretty much a thing that parents run after and think about, right? Especially in India. So what is your story? What got you into insurance tech at such a young age?
It's definitely a good question, like Raj. So I got asked this at Y Combinator as well. So be prepared for this if you're doing fintech as a young founder. And the answer is really straightforward. So we're a small Indian family. It's my mom, her parents, and I. We were not doing very well financially about 15 years ago. My mom was the only one earning. She got a disease called septicemia. So she was in hospital for 3 months in ICU, 3 months of post-operative care. And if it wasn't for the company's health insurance and the health insurance which we had bought over and above that, I think our financial position would have been very, very different to what it is today. And I always wondered, right, how different is the life of other people who are not as fortunate to benefit from insurance. So I've always been excited about it. I'd say I was maybe a little better than the average kid at math in school. So I thought, hey, let's become an actuary. It looks like these guys have a fun job. And I've been working in insurance since the age of 18. So it's been a good 4 years so far.
I think I totally resonate with that, Rahul, because been through a very similar personal trajectory, right? Like having seen uh, sickness from a close quarter, and yeah, this coming in at a time when the internet was pretty much not something that you could take for granted. For most families, which are well-to-do right now, I'm sure that debt was the only option, right, of clearing out medical bills, and I'm sure that is still the case for a large majority of Indian households at this point of time. So I think that's it's a very noble mission for a country like India, right? So what makes me curious is how you broke into this industry, because of course I have not heard of young people. I've heard of young people getting into fintech, and let's say folks like FamPay are now trying to, like young folks are taking on that market. But insurance is a completely new sector for given the sort of branding and the fresh look that you're, bringing onto the sector. How did you break in, and yeah, what's driving you
Yeah.
against these stalwarts?
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. And what I'd say is I have probably spent 2 years writing about InsurTech, right? So August this year actually marked 2 years for me writing about InsurTech. I also wrote about InsurTech in India. And in spite of writing about such a niche topic, I managed to breach like 1 million views on LinkedIn. I think what effectively being young is a double-edged sword, right? Especially in something like fintech. On the one hand, there are people who will not take you seriously and they'll say this guy or this girl or this person doesn't have connections. But equally, going back to your point about open public platforms like a LinkedIn or Twitter, because of my writing, because of the fact that I stayed true to giving like an independent observer's perspective, I already had more than just a foot in the door, right? I'd say I was actually through the door, maybe even better network than people who've spent 10 years in the industry. Because if you think about it, Raj, where does a CFO of an insurance company or a CXO go when they're bored in the middle of a meeting? It's very much so on LinkedIn or Twitter, right? Or maybe a Financial Times, which is not likely. So I'd say the writing really got me the foot in the door, and that's one thing I would encourage any prospective founder to do at some point in their life is to get out there, get your thoughts heard, because your thoughts are almost like your product. And unless you have your thoughts out in the public domain, your product does not have any distribution. And we all know this, that average product, great distribution, distribution wins. Great product, average distribution, distribution wins. Great product, great distribution is where magic happens. And that's what you want to build for yourself.
So I think that's in fact a very relevant point that you make. I think as software is becoming more commoditized to build, like distribution and the way you can get into people's mind is pretty much the only last remaining magical frontier, right, for builders. So I think it's definitely a relevant suggestion for people. A follow-up question on that is, how does one get started? How does one start writing? What has your journey been? Have you always been a writer, throughout your school life?
No.
What's the story?
So, so I'll be honest with you, on writing and reading, these are habits I've picked up very recently, right? So I inculcated a reading habit only about 18 months ago. So just when I graduated out of university and I suddenly realized I actually have free time, right? So let's find something to do. But the dirty truth, Raj, is we didn't have a place for me to put up a gaming station in the house I moved into London. So I had to pick up reading, right? So I probably got a bit lucky there. But on the writing front, right, Raj, what I just started to think is, and this was maybe like 2.5 years ago. So I'm thinking about stuff, and I heard, I don't remember the source now, but it said the best way to consolidate your thoughts and to learn is to put them into writing. And I said, well, if I'm anyways doing this for myself, I might as well share it with other people. But the one thing I can tell you is getting distribution right is very, very hard, right? Both as a product company and as an individual. And one suggestion I would give people is, if you know what segment or space you are writing about, try to find the top 50 to 100 voices in that space and start engaging with them, because one retweet, one comment, or one like from them can get you from a follower base of 0 to 100. And if you've heard of something called Kevin Kelly's 100 True Fans, once there are 100 people who love what you write, who talk about what you write and share what you write, you will slowly sort of climb up the curve. So for me, it was writing about InsurTech, and I would blatantly tag the 5 or 6 people whom I knew would respond, who had 20 to 40K followers, who are very, very well known. And that is actually what bootstrapped my network, right? So when I look at their graph and my social graph on a LinkedIn, it's almost like, damn, dude, we have 1,500 connections in common. That is crazy. But bootstrap the network and stand on the shoulders of giants, right? If there is someone out there who's legit, who's engaging with people, engage with their content and then share your content with them, they will follow, and then everyone else will follow. So that's a long winded answer, I guess, to your pretty valid question.
So I see that you've been playing out the game on both Twitter as well as LinkedIn, right? How do you think of these two platforms
Yeah,
differently?
yeah.
How have they been performing for you? What would you suggest people to start off on, and how?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. And I guess my roots actually began on LinkedIn because I would like slightly longer form content. And what I would actually do is write like a 1 or 2 page Word document and post it onto LinkedIn as a Word document. And that actually began to gain incredible traction. So I've always used LinkedIn as a place where I publish longer form thoughts. Whereas for me, Twitter initially began as just like a open source diary, but I now just use Twitter for its original purpose, right? Talk about something that you're currently thinking about or currently doing. And that is how I've always approached Twitter, right? So if I come across something interesting and I start thinking about it, I just pen my thoughts there, and other people either like, comment, or retweet it. I'd say that different people would look at different platforms fairly differently, but I have found the Twitter audience engages far more voraciously than a LinkedIn audience. And the Twitter audience also tends to overlap with the Substack crew, right? So Substack is the independent publishing platform. And I found most of my Substack traction actually coming off Twitter. So that's another consideration. If people listening to this are looking to build an audience on Substack, Twitter might be the right sort of feeder into a Substack.
I think that is definitely a good map that you've drawn there of like I think of course Substack definitely has a strong tie-in with Twitter. I don't think LinkedIn has seen Substack yet, right? In the way that Twitter folks on Twitter have felt Substack, right? So I had a few questions around your thoughts on the difference that you find in, let's say, the foreign ecosystems, right? You worked as a product manager
Yeah.
in the same industry, in fact,
Yeah.
in the UK, right? What has your experience been in the UK? How does it stand differently from the ecosystem in India?
It's definitely a good one, right? And maybe sort of beginning with insurance, the first thing you come up against in the West is there are some places in the Western world where customers wake up and think about buying insurance, and that is the UK and Germany. So when I was at Laka here as a product manager, my job was not actually educate the customer about bicycle insurance, but it actually was design a good product. Do they love the product? Will they share the product with their friends and family? Whereas in India, I think if you're working in insurance as a PM, your primary focus is actually less as a product manager, more as a product marketing manager, where your job is actually to go out there and educate the customer about why do you require this insurance, or why is this insurance right for you, which in my mind is a very, very different problem statement. So even at BimaPe right now, as the founder slash CEO, I am actually the only PM on the team, right? And one of our core emphasis areas is on what we call education or awareness. So we ship out daily insurance snippet on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on WhatsApp. And this is because we know that preempting, or you have to effectively create demand for insurance. There is demand for education about insurance, but that is a precursor to there being demand to purchase an insurance product. So that's, of course, the one major difference between product management and insurance in the West and in India. But taking sort of a more like a slightly broader, I guess, difference between countries is in India, you have to be conscious that there are already certain established distribution channels, such as WhatsApp, which is not as well established in the West, right? So if you asked a Western PM, how are you going to, engage with your customers? They would say, I'll just pick up the phone and have a chat with them. Whereas in India, you don't do a phone call, you would just end up creating WhatsApp groups over WhatsApp groups. And I think those regional sort of differences have been sort of a steep learning curve for me. And maybe for anyone else who's moving back from the West into India. So those are sort of my thoughts.
I think a very natural question is what made you move to India? I mean, probably, definitely everyone in India wants to go abroad, right?
Yeah.
But you sort of went the other way around after sampling life,
Yeah.
both as a student and as a professional. So what made you come back?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. So I've always wanted to come back and do something in insurance in India, right? That's the first thing I sort of caveat my decision at. And the second is my grandparents are getting old, so it's also part of a personal decision to come back, be with family, spend the last couple of years that they have with them. And I guess that's more on the personal side. But when I look at it more from a professional lens, when effectively there has to be a why now story behind every decision you make, right? Whether it's a personal one or even a professional one for you to found a company. And what excited me and a lot of the early founding team at BimaPe is that there is a massive platform shift occurring in financial services in India. And no, it's not geo, but rather it's regulation as a platform shift. And what I mean by this is stuff like the Data Empowerment Protection Architecture, Personal Data Protection Bill are enabling free flow of banking data, free flow of health data. And there's also pure regulations coming in. This is again on the insurance side, which is almost making it possible to build not only new age insurance products, but a new age insurance business on those regulatory foundations. So that's what has personally got a lot of us, including me, excited. And maybe that's like an entire blog post in itself, right? But yeah, regulation as a platform shift, that's what excites me about coming back to India.
I think not many people, not many young folks are thinking about regulation, right? Especially in your typical engineering circles. The thought is more on the lines of, hey, what is AI going to do for me, or what about blockchain, rather than looking inwards, thinking in terms of the the ramifications that changing regulations can have, right? And the very fact that regulations themselves change,
Yeah.
right? So I think that is something that more founders should definitely look up to, especially in the consumer or the financial services space. There's no doubt about that. So this is sort of a question that I really want to know more about. I tweeted about this a few weeks ago, and I saw that you responded. But for the benefit of our viewers, how should someone in the age bracket of, let's say 22 to 27 think about insurance in India?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. And the one thing I tell you upfront is not everyone should be buying insurance immediately, right? And there are different types of insurance products. I guess for someone listening to this, chances are there are three that are most relevant, right? It's a health insurance, which I think you should have regardless of how old you are. And there are broad guidelines, but I'd say if you're living in a tier one city, try to target like 10 to 15 lakh rupees of health insurance cover. You may get something from your employer, but you also want to make sure you have something of your own. And if your chances of you're earning health insurance is also tax deductible. The one thing I'd warn people is do not fall for people trying to sell you investment products that are masked as insurance products. So this is stuff like a unit linked product, a ULIP, an endowment assurance, and always insist on getting a pure protection product. And unless Raj, you are the sole earning member of your household, or you have financial obligations like an outstanding home loan, car loan, I'd say term insurance is actually not built for everyone. But the one thing I'd say is if you are like me, you're an outdoor enthusiast, I'm a distance runner, make sure you get yourself something called a personal accident product, because at your and my age, the sort of probability curve of there being like an accident resulting in some form of disability which could lead you to loss of income is reasonably high. That's the one thing that people don't appreciate. But Raj, like insurance buying is probably the last thing people think of. But yeah, I can always answer like one-to-one questions at some point.
I'm definitely hopeful that a product is also going to make it incredibly easy for people to figure out what they need and how they should be availing of the products that best serve them. So uh, I think I think I would want to try out something new at this point of time and do a quick rapid fire
Sure.
before closing
Oh,
closing the very interesting chat that I've had with you. So here goes. I want you to answer like in one sentence or less. Phone call or text? What sort of a person are you?
text, definitely.
I see that to be I see
A,
that to be a thing with a lot of young people, and yeah, like
asynchronous communication makes life so much easier, right?
yeah, absolutely. I wish more people like just dropped a text rather than
Yeah.
randomly ringing up the phone, right? Netflix or YouTube?
I'm honestly YouTube. I learned a lot about the startup world of YouTube. Definitely check out Greylock VC's YouTube channel, Y Combinator's YouTube channel, and Reason's YouTube channel. If you could link those Raj to people, that would be fantastic. But highly recommend those.
Of course, I'm gonna do that. So while walking, music or podcasts?
Podcast hands down. I've even started it now whilst running, so I'm becoming part of the nerd crew from the looks of it. But honestly, passive learning for me has been very, very beneficial because I tend to walk to places, not take public transport. So has been like incredibly, incredibly helpful.
Books or ebooks?
Oh man, I like nature probably hates me for doing this, but I'm 100% like a physical book person.
Physical books.
I like to stack them somewhere in the house. Makes me feel like I've done something good in life.
Absolutely. Like I mean, it's always a fight, right? Like it's always a fight to pick between convenience and
Yes.
getting shit done,
Yeah.
right? So classical art or well modern art?
Oh man, I wish I was an art person. I would say this is honestly like the hardest one, right? Because I'll be honest, I don't even know the difference between the two. I go to an art gallery and just look at whatever is there. So I'm gonna have to pass on this one.
That's completely fair. So life's purpose in one short sentence.
Uh, to help uh, to help others whilst helping myself, and maybe create help others by helping myself create value. Probably like a weird way to describe it. But for me, if I don't wake up and I'm not excited about the day, the week, the month, or the year, it's like dead and gone, which is probably the reason why I moved back to India. And yeah, it's definitely the case with BimaPe, right? I wake up in the morning super excited to see how I can work with the team to make insurance easier to understand for other people.
Brilliant, brilliant. I love that. As a fellow founder, I absolutely love the way you frame that. Right. So money in one word. How would you go about that?
Definitely means to an end. And the reason why I say this is I mean, after a point, the utility from money just drops close to zero, right? As your wealth goes to increase. And in my mind, I'd say the only reason I'd want to have a certain amount of money is so I am free to make decisions that I want. And then I can go help people I want or contribute to causes I want. And I think Naval Ravikant puts it best, right? He said money is a means to financial and personal freedom. And he's got a couple more quotes there. But I would endorse that. And after a point, I think money is just like numbers on a sheet.
Fair enough. I think. Yep. I think I'm going to retire this question here because I fear that everyone is going to be answering, like everyone I bring on the show is going to be answering on the same line, and
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Unless and until I think I get someone. I'm actually, in fact, looking for people who have radically different perspectives on money, right?
But
Because
but you know something, I say this, but if BimaPay sold for N billion on the public market and I had N $100 million, that would also be pretty cool because I think the Indian venture ecosystem probably needs an overhaul where you have more founders pouring money behind founders. And I'm not going to take names, but one of my biggest challenges with nascent venture ecosystem, and it's not just India, it's other Southeast Asian markets as well, because I have been on the investment side from UK looking abroad, is that every time a new venture ecosystem props up, it is bankers who make the first move, and then it's founders who get liquidity events come in and replace the bankers. That's what happened in Silicon Valley also, and now it's pretty much founder led money, right? So the Andreessens of the world are full of ex sort of entrepreneurs. That would definitely be helpful, right?
Absolutely.
Almost, yeah, almost getting money to where, like, there are a lot of businesses that can't get off the ground simply because they require n number of years of burn to sustain themselves. And even now, right? So with my team, we have some guys who are based out of cities like Baroda who would have never got a chance to work. But I reckon they've got it in them not only to work for BimaPe, but also one day build their own companies. And can someone get capital to where the best ideas are and not let the best ideas come to the capital, which is where a lot of them drop out?
Which is, yeah, I think that's completely true. And like having founders and experienced operators on your cap table can definitely make a world of difference, right? Like to the survival and the outcomes that everyone who's invested in the company sort of sees. Uh, yeah, I think there'd be nothing better than, like, I think that's every founder's dream after a point of time, that some portion of whatever liquidity that you get should in
Yeah,
fact be poured back in, right,
yeah,
into supporting entrepreneurs. And
yeah,
what I really love, I think the coolest bit about all of this is that you might be talking to someone today, right, and next few months that person might just go on to whatever, hit upon something and pick up pace, right, and be on the highway when it comes to just like learning how to get shit done. So that is the most amazing part about, let's say, the Twitter
yeah,
ecosystem that we have in India, that you should never be betting against people who learn fast, who aren't afraid, who are shameless, right,
yeah,
of shameless when it comes to asking questions and putting things out there and executing
yeah,
on them. In fact, if anything, I wish I had enough free cash lying around to put money on such people. So yeah, I get where that interest and inclination definitely comes from. Uh, I think I want to close this out on a note that not many people sort of openly talk about in the ecosystem, and that is the dark side of being a founder, the
mhm,
uncertainty that
yeah,
comes along with building a company, the stress, the emotional turmoil, dealing with friends, family,
yeah,
everything else. So, what do you have to say to
yeah,
other founders who are in the grind?
yeah. It's definitely a good one. And the one thing I'd say is, it definitely isn't easy, right? Even in my case, so my mom herself is an entrepreneur, so we already have someone in the family who's been through the journey. In her case, bootstrapped; in BimaPay's case, venture backed. The one thing I'd say is learn to separate from day zero the outcome of the company or the progress of the company from your outcome and progress as an individual. And effectively, because most technology companies never get to see the light of day, right? But that failure should not tell on you as an individual. So maybe it's sort of important in the early days to remember that the odds are stacked against you, but as long as you're in it, not only to win it, but also because you love it, that will probably make the whole process much easier. But yes, right, do be prepared for things to take time, things to take longer than you anticipated, people to not understand what you're doing, right? So even now, Bima Pay is venture backed. We've got a rock solid cap table. there are still people who think we're absolute idiots, right? And they could 100% be right. So you need to accept that you will have people on both sides of the table, right? You'll have people rooting for you, and you'll have people who think you're plain stupid, right? But if you don't see people who think you're plain stupid, then chances are you may not be onto something, because it may be so damn obvious that maybe it just isn't a business opportunity there. And be prepared for long work, right? The past pre-launch, I think everyone on our team was probably pulling in excess of 90 hours, and we're slowly sort of tapering it down, right? So this week was about 65, next week will be no more than 60. So just make sure, however early you are, try to keep a sustainable work schedule after a point. I mean, I say this and I'd probably work 13 hours again today, right? So that's just me just sharing some of my lessons. And and see, I mean, at the end of the day, there are tons of founders, like you mentioned, Raj, on the Twitter, right? So if you ever have a question, that's honestly the best place to go ask it, and you will have people respond to you. So even if no one responds to you directly in a chat, you will probably get something in your DMs. And make use of the people that are out there, right? Or if you have a question, just tag me. I'll try to get someone in and help you.
I think, yep, as you rightly said, if people are not skeptical about what you're doing, you're probably not onto something big.
Yeah,
But I would personally say be very careful, because do not use it as a way of justifying
yeah,
what you're doing, because
yeah,
it's very easy to fall
yes,
into the trap that, hey, because people are, right, because people are not skeptical
yeah,
about, I mean, people are skeptical about what I'm trying to do, that means I'm going to be successful. I just want to warn people that it does not work
yes, yeah,
the other way around, right? So
yeah.
thanks Rahul for dropping by at such a short notice. I hope
Most welcome.
to do more of these sessions with you as your company progresses, right? And
Thank you.
as we see more of BimaPe reaching out to the world.